This is the chapter approved 2020 mission pack. Obviously I've wrote on 2021 there. And this is actually the Grand Tournament mission pack for 2021. Now you can see from these two books that there is not really a lot of difference, barring that the older one is way more functional with the spiral bound. These are the core of competitive play in most match play games in your local hobby store that people will be using these. But there isn't really a lot of difference. This one was so little of difference that I actually wrote in the changes because the secondaries only changed a little bit. But the primaries, or the primary missions in this, which there are 6 of for Incursion, which is 1,000 points, and Strike Force, which is 2,000. The primary missions were reprinted into this one, and a lot of people were disappointed with this book because the lack of ring binding, which was a real shame. And also it kind of just felt like the more of the same, where there was kind of some clear problems that didn't really get touched. Until now. Now, as we speak, currently the US Open finale, which is kind of the 3 US Open events which are run by Games Workshop around the US. The top 4 from each event were invited to the Warhammer Citadel in the US as well to play a finale. Now, at this finale, they are playing some brand new primary missions, which are shown off on Warhammer community website. And I wanted to talk about those today. However, after analysing all of the stream footage there is so far, there's actually some new secondaries I want to talk about too. Now, there are 2 missions spoken about on the Wargaming community website, and I will leave links down in the description to the articles so you can find them yourself. One called Secure Missing Artifacts and Recover the Relic. Now, Secure Missing Artifacts is kind of like a redesign of priority targets, and this is kind of like a nice way to make the new missions where it doesn't completely rewrite them, but it definitely makes them more interesting and kind of feels familiar, but also feels very interesting. Now, Priority Targets was a mission from Chapter Approved 2020 and 2021, where essentially you have 5 objectives, one in the centre, one player moves 1, one player moves 2, and then the other player moves the last one. And then you both take the same secondary called Priority Target, which is essentially you choose one of the objectives in your side of the board, and then you hold that one for 3 points a turn. If you get both, you get 5, and you max out 15. Because that's kind of how the missions are played. You have a primary, which is take and hold, or domination, which is basically hold objectives, hold 1, hold 2, hold more, or hold 2, hold 3, hold more, for a maximum of 15 per turn. However, in these new missions, they've actually taken take and hold, especially for secure missing artifacts, and reduced the points. So you can only get 4 points for each condition, hold 1, hold 2, hold more, for a maximum of 12. And they've added a secondary priority target, or a tertiary. Which essentially, at any player's turn, the player whose turn it scores 3 points if they control the priority objective marker that is in their own territory. Now, this is basically the same way you'd play that mission anyway. However, they've reduced the points that you would get for that mission, but also made everyone play that secondary mission, which is interesting. Because before you take and hold, which will score you 45 points, and then you take priority targets, which would probably score you another 15. And that's kind of like the given of what you take for that mission. But now you have that for just 45 points because you have 12 per turn for holding objectives and then 3 for precious artifacts, which is essentially priority target, the old secondary. But now it's part of the primary, so you're both playing that mission. One interesting note is the attacker repositions one labelled A or B, the defender repositions A and a B, and then the attacker repositions the last objective, which is exactly the same. Now, what they've changed really here, one of the other big changes in this mission is that the opponent chooses your priority target, so they choose one of the 2 objectives in your half of the board, and that becomes your priority target, or your precious artifact as it's now called. And you can't avoid that. You have to go and protect the objective that they pick for you, and vice versa, which is really interesting, and it makes it more, in my opinion, a game. The way that 40k kind of feels in some missions now is you don't have to interact with your opponent to win. And in any mission, you could take the primary, which you have to take, then strangle, then engage, and then raise banners. And in that mission, you can score 100 points without interacting with your opponent if you can just make sure they don't hold objectives, which doesn't really feel like a game. It kind of feels like you're playing your game, they're playing their game, and you're just interacting on the board. Whereas now I have direct input to my opponent's mission or their playstyle or what they want to do in the game, because I choose their priority target or their artifact, which I think is really cool. I really like it. Now, the deployment, the mission, the objectives are all exactly the same. They've just changed how the primary works, and it definitely feels revitalized in this instance, which is pretty cool. I really like this one in my opinion. Now, Recover the Relics is kind of a new one. It doesn't feel like any other mission. It has the same layout as Retrieval Mission, which is again a mission that you can look at now, but it has this interesting rule called Recover Relic. In this mission, a player only receives the Battleforge CP bonus at the start of the command phase if they control one or more objective markers in their opponent territory. So they have to be on the other side of the board. As I said, you've got 2 territories, half the board each. You have to be on the other side of the board to get your command point. So this is when you gain a command point at the start of your turn in the command phase. You only get this if you are over halfway. In addition, if at the start of the command phase they control the objective markers in their opponent's deployment zone, so if you're already winning because you're in your opponent's deployment zone, you get an extra CP. This kind of feels like a win more situation, and win more by that term I kind of mean if you're losing, you can't really achieve this, but if you're already winning, you're rewarded for doing that, because you're going to gain an extra command point compared to your opponent if you're in their half of the board, which is quite interesting. Not sure I like that instance, but what this means is you're not going to be gaining command points early game like you would normally. Now, normally most lists start with a lot of command points. My list in particular only starts with 3, so gaining command points is really important. So forward deploy, pre-game move, etc. are going to be like super crucial in this mission, and that's what you want the missions to do. You want the missions to be able to justify list builds or change how you build your list, because if we get more of the same missions, you'll see more of the same lists that'll do well. Whereas this might actually force people to change the style of list that they run, or at least change some elements so they can actually play the mission better. Again, this has taken hold, so hold 1, hold 2, hold more, but the secondary, primary, tertiary is called Break Them Body and Soul, which at the end of each battle round, each player scores 1 point for each enemy unit that was destroyed during that battle round to a maximum of 3 points. A unit can, if it is destroyed and resurrected for any reason, potentially counts as being destroyed several times for the purpose of this primary. So this is essentially, again, like a win more condition, where if you're absolutely like battering your opponent, you're just going to score way more points, and you just have to kill them. This kind of feels like old ITC, which used to be kill 1, kill more, hold 1, hold more. Now this is hold 1, hold 2, hold more, and kill stuff, which is like an really old ITC way of playing, which is like basically 8th edition, how they used to play in 8th edition. But like, this is like a really interesting secondary in the primary. We need a better name for it. I'm going to call it a tertiary. This tertiary is really interesting, and it kind of forces you to play against your opponent. Again, you can't just ignore your opponent in either of these missions, because you need to, well, your opponent has direct influence on the first mission that I spoke about, and on Recover the Relics, you need to kill your opponent to get to win, you know? Like, most of the time you'll do that anyway, but you actually have to kill them to win this one. But they're just the primaries, which have been previewed on Wargaming Community. You've probably already spoken about them. But I want to talk about the secondaries that have also been previewed on the stream, which they haven't publicly announced yet. But before that, a little word from our sponsor. It's me. I just wanted to tell you about this jumper that I'm wearing. Ho ho ho, now I have a Hellstorm bolt rifle. It's available now at hellstormapparel.com, our brand new clothing based website. It's only going to be clothes on there, hellstormapparel.com. All of our clothing is now available at hellstormapparel.com. Grab this in a jumper or in a t-shirt, as you can see, a range of colours, any colour that you like, multiple sizes, shipped locally from the US or the EU. It's instant shipping, you don't have to pre-order this, it's just buy it now. And it really helps me out, and it really helps you out to look even cooler on game day. So grab a t-shirt, grab a jumper, take a look at the links, link in the description or below. Thank you, and yeah, bye. Sorry about that. Anyway, there's only 2 secondaries that you're already aware of, because the GW stream have kind of like hammered them home with how they've changed. One of them being Old ROD, or Retrieve Octized Data, previously known as Scramblers, now known as Retrieve Nakmun Data, or I'm just going to call Retrieve Data. Now this is a secondary that a lot of people take. It's one of the most popular secondaries according to the ITC battle data that I looked at a couple months ago on my live stream. I stream every Monday, Wednesday and Thursday. So you should check it out. But essentially, Rod was essentially land in a corner, do an action, do it in 2 corners, get 4 points, do it in 3 corners, get 8, and then 12, etc. And this could be done by any infantry unit. Now, they have changed this where any infantry or bike unit, but this doesn't exclude characters. So characters can now do Retrieve Nakmun Data. And this screenshot is taken directly from the GW stream. However, there is now some variance in there that you have to roll a dice. You have to roll equal to or lower than your unit size to score Retrieve Nakmun Data. Whereas before it was automatic. Now, if you are a troops unit, you actually get -1 to the dice roll. So you reduce it by 1 to roll under your unit size. So you can go, I'm a unit of 5, I'm deep struck in this corner, I'm going to retrieve Nakmun Data. If I roll a 6, it becomes a 5. So I can't possibly roll over my unit size. So, done. Otherwise, you score it exactly the same way. This is an interesting one because me personally, I hate taking Rod or Retrieve Octarius data. Taking a secondary that forces you to play in the corners of the board and then do actions a unit can't do anything for only 12 points in total. Pretty sucky in my opinion. But a lot of people take it because in their opinion, it is easy to score, but then you automatically drop 3 points. But it is a very popular secondary, and I think this is why it's received a nerf. Now, this hurts Lictors in Tyranid armies. Now, Tyranids are the big boogeyman right now, but before that, before the Hive Guard meta, Lictors were like auto-take the 33-point infantry, deep strike them in, anywhere on the board. Rod. Command squads, units of 2, company veterans if you're not using them for the bodyguard broken stuff. Again, I've spoken about bodyguard as a video that way. Go and watch that. They can't Rod successfully anymore. And yes, now you can do it on characters, but you need to roll a 1. It's really hard to do, but you have more options to do it, if that makes sense. So you have a lot more ways you can do it, but it's a lot harder to do. Now, it benefits bike units because they are super fast. They can ride into the corner and then do their action. It kind of helps out like Space Marines, or if you're taking like scouts, if you really want to take scouts, why would you be taking scouts? But you know, it's just like those kind of like 5-man unit, small bases, strategic reserve into a corner is kind of nice. But it penalizes elite armies and it penalizes one model infantry units that they've got. So they've made it better for all units because any unit can do it that's infantry or a bike, but they made it harder to do and adds variance, which is kind of like really annoying. The other one that they've gone over quite a bit is No Prisoners. No Prisoners is a really good secondary already, especially into armies like Necrons where they revive and you get loads of models back and then you kill them again. And they've made it even easier to score. Basically, No Prisoners, if you kill 10 wounds or more, you get a point, and then if you kill 20, you get 2 points, etc. But now what they've done is once you've hit the 50 mark, once you've done 50 wounds, you get a bonus point. So once you're at 50 wounds, you actually get 6 points, and then 6 is 7, etc. But also, if you get over the 100, the magical 100, you actually get 2 bonus points instead. So 100 wounds is now worth 12 victory points, which is really interesting because it's made that secondary even better, but it was already pretty good. But what it's doing, as I mentioned, like with the primaries, where you could just take some secondaries that don't interact with the opponent, it feels like they're making some of the kill secondaries a little bit easier to score to make you interact more, which is probably good for the game. Maybe. Armies that were already killing you are now going to do better, and armies that hid because that's their early play style are going to struggle. I haven't played any of the new missions. I'm purely theorising, but I don't know. Very interesting. But I will be playing one live on Thursday, so make sure you tune in at 7:15. The other one that they have shown off on stream is Investigate Signals. So this was like a really, really bad secondary, and you just wouldn't take it whatsoever. Now, Investigate Signals in the old book was essentially any infantry unit that isn't a character goes to the middle of the board, performs an action within 6 inches. If there's no enemy units there, you do an action, bing, bada bing, bada boom, 3 points. That's it. But there's got to be no enemy units. But they have changed it. It's basically the same. Characters can now do it, but they have to have 3 or more models in the unit. So Celestine, Grimaldus, maybe someone else can do it. But any infantry unit can do it that has 3 or more models. But they can do this action while it's wholly within 6 inches of the centre. It's completely at the end of your turn as normal. However, the check for enemy models is not when you start performing the action, it's at the end of the turn. Because before, if there was one model from your enemy's army within 6 inches of the centre, so 12-inch bubble within 6 inches, you couldn't perform this action. But now you can perform this action, but at the end of the turn, when you go to complete it, there has to be no enemy units, which gives you a whole turn to shoot stuff, psychic, fight, etc. So it makes this secondary a little bit easier, but the problem is it has to be 3 or more. Kind of like penalises small units again. And there's a couple of other secondaries which they haven't shown off, which I've heard rumours or read about, and I want to talk about further. Speaking of 3 or more in a unit, there is Engage on All Fronts. A very good secondary. It's essentially being 3/4 of the board for 2 points, being 4/4 for 3 points at the end of your turn. And aircraft count for this. So you fly into the other corner of the board, you get 2 points, you fly into 3. Now, this secondary is scored exactly the same way. However, it has to be a unit of 3 or more, which penalises elite armies. It penalises those lictors again. It penalises cyber wolves and space wolves. They're kind of like a little tricksy one as well. It just punishes smaller units. And with Engage on All Fronts and also Investigate Signal, it's going to make your opponent want to kill your units down to like 2 models and then just kind of ignore them because you can't do your secondaries there. But otherwise, it's still the same. It's still a strong secondary, but it's just, again, just penalising smaller units. them having like one guy deep strike and then getting you that objective. Another one that they've changed is bring it down. So bring it down previously, well, score a point if you kill a vehicle or monster with 10 or less wounds, 2 if it has 11 or more, and 3 if it has 20 or more. But there's not much that's more than 20 unless it's a knight, and then you're taking Titan Hunter anyway. So bring it down wasn't a very good secondary anyway. But they have changed that. They've changed the bracket. So now you get 1 point if it's got 9 or less. You get 2 points if it's got 10 or more, which means raiders, rhinos, etc. are susceptible to 2 points. And then if you've got 15 or more land raiders, bigger knights, anything else like that, they are worth 3 points. Now again, this makes a killing secondary a lot stronger, in my opinion, a lot better, a lot more interesting, and it kind of forces you to take secondaries that are better, because these are better now, and it kind of wants you to play against your opponent again rather than hiding in the building and scoring points. Anyway, the final one that's been changed, deploy teleport homers. So deploy teleport homers before was basically do an action with an infantry or bike if you're within 12 inches of your opponent's deployment zone, so in their board half usually, and you score it at the start of your next command phase and you get 2 points, unless you are wholly within the deployment zone, so even further onto the board, then you get 4 points. Now this was really hard to do, and the reason no one takes it is because you have to be on the other side of the board. You have to be wholly within their deployment zone to actually score real points, because 2 points is a little bit slow because there's only 5 turns. So you really want to be in their deployment zone to max this secondary out. And then you score at the start of your command phase, so they get a whole turn to kill you before the secondary completes. But now this is going to be completed at the end of the turn if you are a troops battlefield role. There is no limitation of size of unit from what I've seen and what I've read and what I've heard. So there's no limitation of size, but essentially what you can do is you can drop in as a troop unit into your opponent's deployment zone and score 4 points. It's basically like Rod used to be, but kind of more consistent, because you don't have to be a certain size, you just have to be troops. You can kind of get into your opponent's deployment zone, perform the action, at the end of your turn you get 4 points, and do that for like 2 turns, because you've got turn 1 where you can't deep strike, and then turn 2 and turn 3 where you can. And then if you've got any other shenanigans where strategic reserves and stuff like that, you can then fly up and then go back down and do it in turn 4 and 5 as well. And it's going to get harder and harder for the opponent to zone you out the more the game goes on. But this is like a really interesting secondary now. If you aren't troops, it's really, really difficult. But if you are a troop unit, then it's actually going to be like quite easy to score this, I think, in my opinion. It makes it way more interesting and much better than Retrieve Command Data. But we'll have to see. We will have to see. Now, they didn't touch any other secondaries as far as I'm aware, so I believe all the other secondaries are exactly the same and they have remained in the book, barring the mission secondaries, which have all been taken out for this primary tertiary secondary. Now, it's a shame they didn't touch Warpcraft. In my opinion, Warpcraft is kind of rubbish. It's kind of not great. Pierce the Veil, it's just like, get out my book. You are a waste of text. But that's it. That's the changes to the primaries. That's the secondaries that I know of that you might not know of already. And it's going to make 40k feel a little bit like a refresh, you know? We haven't had new missions or new primary missions for 2 years since the book came out, or maybe like 18 months or something like that. These are going to make the game feel a little bit more refreshed, but they're also going to be kind of like a little learning curve for a lot of people who play the game already, because they are new, which means your army builds might struggle into them. As I mentioned, some common units that do some of these secondaries already really well, that don't have access to that anymore because there's variants, because with Retrieve Command Data you have to roll dice. And some units like Engage on All Fronts, you just can't do it with certain units now. That one guy who survived and he runs over the other battlefield and Engage, not anymore, you can't do that, which is a real shame. So I think nerfing Retrieve Command Data, I don't think I like it. It wasn't a great secondary in my opinion anyway. You guys probably love it. If you do, let me know down in the comments. I didn't like that secondary anyway, so nerfing it just makes it even worse. And my army doesn't like it, you know. Changing no prisoners, again, it kind of builds on that win more. If you're playing against Necrons, you're just getting even more points for no reason, because you're already killing 100 wounds anyway, because they just keep reviving. Investigate signals is way more interesting. Deploy teleport homers is way more interesting and actually worth looking at, and they're in the same category as Retrieve Command Data, so you might not even see people take that one anymore. You might be looking at those other two. But Engage, in my opinion, is a decent secondary, and they've nerfed it, so without having those mission secondaries to rely on, the older books, in my opinion, are going to really, really struggle, because the secondaries that they were relying on, such as Engage, such as Rod, they've been nerfed. And the armies that have codexes which can take secondaries from are kind of in the same position, because they only really need to rely on 1 or 2 secondaries from these books anyway, because they take one from their codex, or they take 2 if they're Space Marines with the new supplement. Like Dark Angels will always take Oath of Moment and Stubborn Defiance. Now, the way the priority targets work, or retrieve relics, maybe I'll get used to it, I promise. The way like retrieve relics works is that where you choose an objective for Stubborn Defiance for a Dark Angels player, and then your opponent can just accidentally choose the other one. Makes it a lot harder, because normally you'd score 15 for sitting on this objective with 1 unit, and then you score 3 points every turn for a priority target. That makes it way more interesting, but books that don't have secondaries to choose from are just going to struggle even more. But what do you guys think? What do you like the changes of these books? Do you like that? I like the fact that they're changing the primaries, but let me know if you guys like the changes. And then the secondaries, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be crying about Rod for Retrieve Natman data, but we just have to deploy some teleport hermes instead. It's the same really, but you get more points for it because you can actually max that one. But otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, check out hellstormapparel.com for your new Christmas jumper, only available this month, and obviously it's available in t-shirts as well. It's our new website. I really appreciate if you support it. I've got exciting news coming very soon, so keep your eyes peeled, and buying t-shirts will help support this cool idea that I've got. So otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely day, and hopefully I'll catch you in a live stream. Bye bye now.